Hello, I'm Kieran with Nerdemic, and welcome to Kieran's Musings. On this episode, we are going to be looking at my personal favourite line from the Star Wars franchise.
I have the high ground!
Yes, I know what you're thinking. That was a terrible line from a terrible film, and I am a terrible, terrible person for making you relive it. But hold your horses, because I'm going to explain to you in the course of this short video why this line is incredibly underrated and really, really gives us an in-depth look at one of the greatest characters in the Star Wars franchise. Nay, in any sci-fi franchise. Nay, in any franchise. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Warning beforehand, this video will give spoilers for episodes 1, 3, 4, Star Wars Clone Wars, and Star Wars Rebels. So if you haven't seen them, do. Also, why are you watching this video if you haven't seen them? I mean, it's Star Wars. It's a given. Even people who don't like the prequels have seen them, at least. Moving on. So,
I have the high ground!
Seems like a ridiculous line at the end of what has been one of, in my opinion, the best fights in the Star Wars franchise. Now, I know the film was terrible, but finally getting to see Anakin and Obi-Wan go at it whilst at their peak was amazing. The fight was well choreographed, the CG was tolerable for the time, and let's face it, we're probably going to get some kind of digitally remastered version coming out within the next 10 years or so anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. But this line, it struck a chord with people. Obi-Wan Kenobi was stood at the top of a fairly small incline of a hill with Anakin at the bottom and yelled out,
I have the high ground!
Why is this such a terrible line? Well, of course, they're Jedi. Who really cares if he stood at the top of a rather small incline? Let's call it a hill. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and call it a small hill. Well, here's why. Obi-Wan Kenobi, as opposed to most of the other characters we meet in the Star Wars franchise, ones like Yoda, Luke, and Anakin, is not as gifted with the Force. We very rarely see him using Force powers outside of the Jedi mind trick, so it's fair to assume that he probably can't move around massive buildings like we see characters like Yoda doing, or, Luke trying to move his X-Wing. I'm sure he probably can do it by now. But Obi-Wan decided to specialize in his lightsaber skills, which is evident from the fact that he is pretty badass with a lightsaber. Now, Obi-Wan, throughout his career, I call it a career, he will have trained himself again and again, never really feeling as though he had mastered the skills, even upon becoming a Jedi Master. Not being as gifted with the Force as others, Obi-Wan Kenobi will have mastered lightsaber skills instead, which is evident from the many fights that we see him in, specifically in the prequel trilogy, Clone Wars, and, on one occasion, Rebels. Now, ways in which he may have done this is to study other users of lightsabers, to learn from their mistakes, and to train based on the kind of styles that they do. And a very easy way for him to do this would have been to study people he had fought against himself. Now, the first major encounter we see Obi-Wan Kenobi in is in Episode 1 against Darth Maul. At this point, his master, Qui-Gon Jinn, brilliantly played by Liam Neeson, I say brilliantly played, he played an Irishman with a lightsaber, has just died, and Obi-Wan, consumed by rage, gets into a brief but very intense fight with Maul, who is, I would say, at the time at least, a much better lightsaber duelist, mastering the double-sided lightsaber and taking on two trained Jedi at the same time. Obi-Wan Kenobi, for anyone who doesn't remember at this point, was still technically a Padawan and hadn't actually graduated to become a full-blown Jedi. And he found himself virtually defeated, knocked off a platform almost to his death, clinging on by his fingertips, using his Jedi strength just to stay alive, basically. Now, as anyone who has seen the film knows, he managed to gain the upper hand, jumped up, grabbed his master's old lightsaber, and sliced Darth Maul in half. Now, Darth Maul would come back later on in both the Clone Wars and in Star Wars Rebels with a new set of robotic feet, and Obi-Wan would face him again in both of these versions, these spin-offs of the canonical Star Wars franchise. Now, Gradually, as he went along, Obi-Wan became a much better duelist, taking on both Darth Maul and his brother when he met him later on in the Clone Saga. Not the Clone Saga, that's Spider-Man. Me. Obi-Wan Kenobi would later meet Darth Maul again in the Clone Wars, where he would battle against Maul and his brother, and a final time in Rebels, where he would defeat Darth Maul. Now, we are going to get to that in a bit, but let's move back. So, his first major battle, he manages to defeat someone who has a height advantage against him. You see where I'm going with this? Yeah? We know that Obi-Wan Kenobi becomes a very, very gifted lightsaber duelist. As I've already mentioned, he took on Darth Maul and his brother and managed to survive, and in his final duel against Darth Maul, manages to defeat and kill him with their lightsabers only clashing twice. He trained himself so well that his precision had got to the point where he could defeat his greatest adversary in just 2 moves. So, the first thing Obi-Wan, upon becoming a Jedi Master, would have trained himself to do would be to take and maintain the advantage whilst on the high ground. Oh, yes, you see what I did there, don't you? Cheeky. So, this would be something that he would of course pass on to his Padawan being Anakin Skywalker. Anakin would have also learned from his master how to take and maintain advantage whilst on the high ground, making sure that no pesky Sith or Jedi could jump up and slice you in half while you were standing there. So, when Obi-Wan Kenobi says,
I have the high ground!
What he's actually saying to him is, hey Anakin, do you remember when I first started training you and I was teaching you lightsaber skills and I told you about the battle that I had against Darth Maul, who you also met, so you were very interested to hear how this panned out because you were up shooting down things in a Naboo fighter that was trying desperately to outdo the X-Wing but didn't. I digress. So, he will have taught Anakin the various things that he learned about gaining, maintaining advantage on the high ground. And what he's really saying is, Anakin, don't do it. I've been teaching you this stuff for nearly 20 years, and this is the main thing. This is the main thing. When I have the high ground, you are screwed. Okay? So don't do it. Don't jump. Anakin, no flippy Anakin. I'm going to have to cut your legs off now. And that is why
I have the high ground!
Is actually one of the greatest lines in Star Wars history and gives us a more in-depth look at one of our favourite characters, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I have been Kieran for Nerdemic, and this has been Kieran's Musings. Thank you, and goodbye. Hi guys, and welcome to the Nerdemic channel. This is your best source for geek culture. So check out our videos and remember to like, share, and subscribe.